I had a brief conversation with Michael Gilliard today, and he was telling me some things that have happened with the land bank, and suggested that we invite Daniel Cantor, who is the jefe, the president, the overlord. What's the
chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board, driving force behind the land bank. And so I thought it'd be great if Daniel would come along and tell us some of the things they've been doing. They've been making some good progress lately. So with everyone's forbearance, Daniel, if you'll join us and let us know the good news from what's been happening the last couple of weeks and months.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I know some of you guys, not all of you. I'm Daniel Cantor. I'm chairman of the board of the Kingston City Land Bank. I've held that position since the inception. It has been a very active couple of years. We're coming up on our second year anniversary. And so I guess just to start, my personal belief is we don't really gain anything by not all sharing information. So I will be as transparent and open and candid and totally willing to answer questions. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with the land bank story and the whole history, but basically 2 years ago this month, the Common Council authorized the sale of 36 city-owned properties, all tax was to the land bank for the full price of the back taxes owed on those properties, and with the goal being to establish an efficient, transparent, time-tested process to get the properties back into productive use, back onto the tax rolls, improving vastly on the sort of previous systems of doing auctions that were sort of no holds barred, and as long as you buy it, do whatever you want, and that was kind of it. So it, like any new organization, has, had ups and downs. Certainly the first year, I think it's no secret, was quite challenging. We had a change in leadership effective January 1st of this year. Our former ED was Brenna Robinson, who at the time was the director of economic and community development within the city. I think it was quite clear to people both in and outside of the organization that she was a little overextended in her job. And I think as a result, the land bank had a difficult time getting off the ground. That has changed enormously, I would say, certainly over the course of the last 10 months, kind of on hyperdrive since Mike Gilliard was hired in May. I'm not sure if he's even on this call, but he's a total powerhouse and the smartest guy I've ever worked with. So we are hugely lucky to have him. So the mission of the land bank remains the same as it's always been. I think the expectations that were set early on, even before the board formed, were not especially realistic. So I think that's part of where some of the negative energy around people's perception of the land bank has come from, is unfortunately that early expectations were just mismanaged by my evaluation. So one of the things that we've had to figure out, which most land banks would have had figured out before the board even formed, was basically the structure within the city to effectively transfer these properties from city ownership to land bank ownership. That is something that we are still working to streamline. It was very difficult over the course of the first about year and a half to kind of get anybody's attention in the city. Now we have made great strides. I believe yesterday We had Jeff Neal, who's the director of finance for Albany County, actually came down and met with myself and Steve and Peter Buffett, who runs the Nova Foundation, and the city's corporation council and the comptroller and the city assessor. And we sort of got all these people in a room to really try to hammer this out. And I think we are very close to good solutions there. That hasn't stopped progress. So we, back in July, I believe, we closed on our first 3 properties. They are 174 Hasbrook Avenue. Sorry, dogs are in the nightmare. Hold on. Stop. 174 Hasbrook, 248 Main, and 64 Van Buren. So we are just like the map of properties that are on the table. We're spread throughout the city, and believe that that is really the most effective way to create affordable housing. So on that topic, I guess one thing that you guys should understand, and again, I just don't know everyone's background here, Kingston is a very different place than most places that have land banks. Typically, land banks are formed in very, very blighted communities. So Albany is a great example where entire city blocks will be vacant and condemned, and they foreclose on thousands of properties a year. It's a really huge task. Consequently, they are very open to private investment coming in, developers coming in, basically anybody who will take on these projects and do them effectively is kind of on the table. In Kingston, we have obviously a much more limited group of properties. Right now, we're talking about 36. It's my understanding that typically the city forecloses on about 12 a year. Some of those will be vacant land, some of those will be housing. But just the scale of our issue is much, much different, and it's much more spread around, which is a good thing. Part of the implication of that is that, and just our, increasingly gentrifying housing market, is that we, as a land bank, which is very different than many, believe that we should place our focus on creating affordable housing, which has a fairly limited definition. Realistically, you have to be smart about these things. You can't sort of give houses away willy-nilly, which is sort of what the city has done in the past. This is a very vetted process. It is one that has existed in many places for a long time, but all the buyers have to be certified and eligible through many different mechanisms. The result of that is that those buyers have far lower rates of foreclosure or inability to stay current on their taxes or maintain the property than the wider housing market that's not nearly as kind of controlled and regulated. So we stand by that the outcomes will be excellent, that these properties will be returned to productive use, they will be back on the tax rolls, they will be beacons of the neighborhood, they will, all of the good things. So currently, one of the challenges that we've had is clarity on funding. So what the board was told early on, and was kind of the narrative for a long time, was that there had been a $3 million+ funding commitment for the land bank. That was never memorialized in writing. There was no grant agreement in existence. We had a very difficult in kind of making contact with the funder, who had apparently indicated that. This was before I was involved, so I could not independently verify this. So that was part of the delay in acquiring properties at all, was just that we had this lump of funding that was supposed to basically immediately buy all of these properties. Nobody had really figured that process out. So that didn't account for title searches. It didn't account for phase 1 environmental work. It didn't account for filing fees. And it certainly didn't account for our just operating costs of staff and insurance and all of that stuff. So over the summer and this fall, we have gotten much more attention from the Novo Foundation. We are in the middle of a grant agreement with them to fund basically half of 5 full rehabs that we'll be doing in 2021. The RFPs for those for contractors to bid on the work went out last week. We have walkthroughs tomorrow. We expect to be in contract in December and starting construction in January. So that's great. That's kind of one path. The land bank, I believe, and I think most people who deal with land banks agree that the land bank is not really designed to be a renovation force that sort of spreads through the city and rehabs all the houses. It's not an efficient process. If we were talking about 5 houses a year, that would be a different story. We are not interested in holding properties for years, particularly this first round where they've already sat for years. And so the goal is to kind of get them out as efficiently as possible. So while we're working on these rehabs, we're also working on developing the process so that we can sell properties as is. The major difference between that and how the city used to do stuff being that there's actually controls in place. So there is an actual RFP process. There's reverter clauses for if people don't follow through on the plan that they laid out. I've personally seen this happen with properties in the city of Kingston that the Common Council authorized the sale to somebody with sort of a proposal, and 6 years later, the house is still vacant and boarded up, and the city really has no recourse because there was no real process in place. Those are kind of the main strokes. So on one hand, we'll be rehabbing, we'll also be selling as is, we're trying to figure out right now, there's a couple of properties that have potential environmental issues, and basically how do we most effectively address those? So we are very familiar with all of the properties. We're trying to kind of work through them as smartly and efficiently as possible. I think we're sort of finally at a point with the city's corporation council where they're understanding their role and responsibility in this more and refining their own process, which is good. And so I think that's kind of where we're at.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
So why only half now and half later?
Sorry, say again?
That you're only doing the first half of them right now? Is that right? Did you say that?
No, so we're doing 5 rehabs. That is because under Brenna Robinson, before the board even formed, she applied for a grant with Enterprise. It's basically a pot of money that...
That's okay. My question was just, are you moving forward with all of them at this point or staggering them over the next year?
Yeah, that's the plan. The issue is that we have to be responsible about how we're acquiring them. So we can't just buy them and then find out that there's a major title issue that was never resolved. We are running into that in sort of various instances. And so it's my strong feeling that, we can't spend ourselves into the ground just so that the city can get its back taxes back immediately. That would serve nobody. And so all of these properties have to be evaluated individually. Work has to be checked up on. But we're in that process right now, essentially because it's a small place and these title companies are small. We can only request 5 title searches at a time. It's all very quaint, but we're getting through them and trying to just resolve any issues that are coming up. Part of the sort of mythology that was spread around about land banks is that have some sort of special power unique to land banks to clear title that the municipality doesn't have. That's not true. So I think a lot of people on the city side have sort of been operating under that assumption. It's not the case. So we're finally kind of getting all of that stuff straightened out so that we can proceed.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think just to sort of round that out, like at this time, I don't think that in all of my experience of dealing with the city government, there's really nothing in place seemingly to sort of do this an alternate way. So obviously there's interest on different properties. It's come to us, we don't even own them yet. But I think that we are here to solve a pretty specific problem that the city has grappled with for a very long time. And so I don't see any benefit to the city trying to somehow create some parallel process that's unrelated to the land bank just to sort of move things along. Like, it doesn't make sense. So in some places like Albany, which is much bigger, the legislature would basically go to different city departments and say, we have this property. Is there a use that you guys have for it that you can facilitate? To me, in Kingston, we don't have enough capacity on the city government side for any other department to facilitate these things. I think that's pretty demonstrable from the history. And so I think what the land bank is offering and is equipped to do and funded to do is to facilitate those processes, whatever they might be. So, one part of it is the rehabs, but there's all these other ways to dispose of property that the land bank, I think, is much better equipped to handle than anything that exists currently on the city side. And I think it would be a waste of city resources to try to formulate some other thing. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to first say it's amazing all the work that you're doing, and thank you for stepping up and doing it. It's really, someone had to, and thank you.
Michelle, you've got a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm really kind of lost here when you just keep saying there's another alternate parallel plan, and I don't know what you're referring to.
I barely know what I'm referring to, except for instance, there is a property on Franklin Street. It's been vacant for years. It was a house that burned down shortly after I moved here. The city demolished it. For some reason, that is still sort of a mystery to me. But again, we are trying desperately to work through this with Corp Council so that they have a better system in place for foreclosures. The property finally got foreclosed on. In the meantime, about 2 years ago, a neighbor who's a local gardener got a grant to do a pollinator garden on that site. I see no reason why the land bank wouldn't support an effort like that or work in collaboration with the land trust. But this group, obviously, because they've had this grant for so long on a property that the city didn't even own, and couldn't do anything with, I guess now has sort of tried to go to, I think, the director of community health or wellness or something. I don't remember. I'm so sorry. But, they want to know if they can make it happen and if the land bank is even interested in this property. And my thing is they could, but I don't think that department is equipped to see this proposal through. So what happens when they get a lease to the property and nobody's there to make sure that they have the necessary insurance in place? Nobody's there to make sure that they're actually following through on the proposal that they put forth. I mean, these are issues that are, not imaginary. They happen all the time. And so I think it would be a very, very poor precedent to set that there's some other pathway that can subvert the process that the land bank is forming. So, as an exception to that whole protocol that's being put in place to solve this exact problem. So,
Great. So, Daniel, so there's been movement very recently, right, on the first three houses that you all have taken on. So what's happening with those three houses?
so those three houses, so again, that was in part of the grant agreement, basically the whole grant agreement with Enterprise. So we got a $500,000 grant. It's reimbursements. It's all very complicated. Luckily, we have Mike for that. But those have to be sold as affordable. I believe it's under 100% of AMI. We chose them specifically because they were either in pretty dire need or sort of on the smaller side. We are, not, I do this for a living, but as a group, we are not experienced property developers. And so we didn't kind of want to bite off more than we could chew to begin with.
But you've got people going through right now, and actually they're going to be giving a RFP for doing the renovations and starting soon, right?
The RFP is out. It's about a 40-page document. The scope is in there. There's the construction drawings. There's kind of everything about the renovation. We have walkthroughs tomorrow. We have walkthroughs again, I think, a week from tomorrow. And then there's a period of requests for information where they can submit additional questions or ideas or whatever. And then the bids will come in as bid packages. Then there's a process of leveling all the bids and making sure that everyone has all their ducks in a row. And then the contract should be awarded and construction should start in January. So yeah, I mean, we're on track.
So, and the three houses, one is the one at 248 Main Street, right? What are the other two addresses?
174 Hasbrook Avenue and 64 Van Buren. So 64 Van Buren. Van Buren has quite a bit of vacancy. The house has been vacant for a very long time. 248 Main, I think you're quite familiar with, also has been vacant for quite a while. The neighbors are understandably not pleased. And so, and it's our belief that by rehabbing that house and selling it as an affordable unit, with all these controls in place, we can kind of do a little bit of public education on what affordable housing actually looks like and means, and who the buyer is. I've spoken to many of the neighbors. There's certainly a lot of anxiety about, oh God, this person's not going to be able to maintain the house and it's going to be a whole nightmare. And that's really not borne out by how these things actually work in reality when somebody experienced and knows what they're doing is behind it. And that's what we have. So I think it'll be really, really exciting. And obviously people will be happy to see that house finally getting work done. So we've also pulled historic photos of all of the properties. One of our priorities is, trying to respect the history of Kingston and be part of that historic fabric rather than kind of working against it. And so the scopes include plans to basically restore the exterior of the houses. The interiors tend to be sort of lost, especially 64 Van Buren. But it was a beautiful house. And so the goal is to bring it back and really make it better than it was before we were involved.
Great. So, Michelle, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Hi. Sorry. So can you just clarify two things? One, what do you mean when the council used to do this, it was willy-nilly? Like the council never had a land bank before, so they just auctioned homes?
It's been several iterations. So when I moved to Kingston, I believe it was the auction system. I moved in 2013. Later on, as far as I understand it, there was basically a private contract with Wynn Morrison Realty to market and sell tax foreclosed city-owned properties. It doesn't take a lot of complicated math to understand that when properties are selling for $5,000 to $10,000, for the most part, the private realtor doesn't have a whole lot of incentive to get involved in that because it's 6% on $5,000. So what we found was that they weren't coordinating well with the city to begin with, just in the foreclosure process at all. Then there would be, they would maybe list the house, they maybe wouldn't, no one was really checking, so whatever. Then they finally would. So I can speak from my own experience. I, before the land bank existed, sort of was attempting to do this privately. And so there was a house on Van Buren Street that I had a partner for. We were planning to rehab it and sell it as a single family house. We had crunched all the numbers. This wasn't a big money-making venture by any means, but we thought it was a beautiful house and something worthy of preservation and should be sold as a single family and not converted into another multifamily on a street that has almost owner-occupied units, etc. We were told at the time, this was in October, years ago, that it would be on the agenda of the finance committee on that Wednesday. And so we had to put it in an offer and it had to happen really quickly. So we did. And then it wasn't on the agenda. And then November happened. Again, December, January, February. I think finally in March, they put it on the agenda. We had been told that they would make the decision immediately that night. That did not happen. They had some hushed conversation and then sort of said, oh, well, there's two offers. And the other guy, by the way, couldn't commit to anything about what he was going to do with it. Nothing. He was from Yonkers. He already owns 2 income properties on Cedar Street, both in fairly poor repair. I do this professionally. My friend that I was going in on it with had won the award from Friends of Historic Kingston for the work on his own house. I mean, I thought we had a pretty legit proposal. They turned around, the finance committee members at the time, and told us that we should submit best and final offers by that Friday. They were very clearly kind of making this up on the spot. And then that we should also submit a proposal. I asked what should be involved in this proposal. I don't know, just do something.
Okay, so just to clarify, they weren't running a land bank though. They were just auctioning off houses at the time. It's totally separate.
Yeah, the problem was it wasn't auctioning because an auction would suggest you were trying to get the best price. So when I first got on the council, it was more like different parties would come and make proposals on a property, and then it was kind of like, well, we like this one. There were no clear criteria. There was no real incentive. There was no plan. And most of these properties went for just a few $1,000s. Several of them that we approved, people never did anything with them. So it was a really, as far as I was concerned, dysfunctional process.
Yeah. So if I could just add to that too.
So how many houses so how many houses now, or do we have those sitting off the tax rolls because we only have a commitment for 5 right now?
Well, it depends how you calculate it. So I don't know, honestly, how many are currently foreclosed on, because that continues to change. And one of the things that we're trying to work through with the Corporation Council is to involve the land bank earlier in the process so that we're not blindsided by, oh, we foreclosed on this yesterday and now you have to do something about it. So of the 36 properties on the original resolution, there are 24 that are houses. The others are vacant land. As far as I understand, the city recently foreclosed on, I believe, 1 residential property, but it's a 4-unit building. So
Are there more that have stacked up the last 2 years, another 12 or 15? As
far as I'm aware, yes, but I don't, have tried to look into them. Many of them on Parcel Viewer are still not showing as owned by the city of Kingston, which would indicate that they have not been foreclosed on yet, even though they're in the period during which they should be. So that's, frankly, we've encountered a fair amount of opacity within the Corporation Counsel office and just sort of sharing this basic information.
Well, foreclosure, since COVID hit, we're not doing any foreclosures.
That is not the case.
Oh, that's okay. That's what I was told by Janet Higgins.
They're not doing evictions, they are doing foreclosures.
Okay.
All right, so Danielle, thanks for coming tonight. I mean, we've got some other business to take care of. We're a lot smarter now than we were about the land bank. But real quick, I just want to note that Mike was pointing out earlier today that the land bank has secured a fair amount of new funding, is in the process of making several applications for even more. So the basic message I get from you is that there had been a fair number of complications over the first year and a half of getting the land bank started, but now you've got these first several houses ready to go. You've got the RFP out for them. Construction will begin in January, and then other houses will begin to follow in fairly quick succession after that. Yes?
That's correct. And I don't know if I mentioned, so the Enterprise grant and the Novo grant are for 5 houses. So we need 2 more. And so we're in the investigation period. Both of those houses are part of the grant agreement is that they're located in Midtown. That we only have 5 options for that. So we're looking at all of them and basically whatever we can get kind of the most efficiently and issues that will likely be the ones that we do. So all of those 5 have to be done in 2021. But that's not to say that we won't be purchasing other properties in that year. They just likely will not be ones that we personally rehab. So that could mean that we coordinate with another nonprofit group. That could mean that we sell it as is, but again, with these controls, including, by the way, resale restrictions. So Rennie, one of the houses that the city sold 5 years ago or so is on Prospect Street. I believe they bought it for $10,000. Even before COVID, actually, they sold it for $350,000. So we're not here to be a handout for flippers. We are not here to be a handout for property developers. They have plenty of money and plenty of opportunity to do that on their own. The city should not be in the business of facilitating that. We can do better, and we will do better. But and obviously we vastly appreciate everybody's kind of patience and understanding.
I have 2 just really quick questions. Are all of the other properties being maintained, like the yards? And
well, yes. So until the land bank owns the property, that really is under the purview of DPW. DPW has failed to provide those resources both before the land bank formed and after. So the land bank, last year, we had sidewalk shoveled for every single property on that list of 36. We didn't own a single one of them at that point. We had tree work done where dead trees were threatening either a house that was slated for us or a neighboring property. We had those taken care of. So we have tried very hard to not kind of overextend ourselves in ways that we really shouldn't be doing since we're not the property owner, but just as a matter of kind of goodwill in the neighborhood, trying to make sure that these things
thank you for that. So and then the last quick question, because I know we have to move on to other stuff. There was talk about the county merging with our land bank, and I'm just curious to know what the status is of that.
Yeah, so I know that Mike, I believe, has a bi-weekly or monthly at least call with the person on the county side that's sort of in charge of that. So far, they made seemingly no progress whatsoever in anything that they would have to do on their end to make this happen. On our end, I can say, I think number one, let's remember we are still a fairly young organization. I don't want us to overextend to the point that we can't do anything well. And frankly, we are the Kingston City Land Bank. I swore an oath. I am here to serve the residents of Kingston. I'm not here to serve a private funder, and I'm not here to kind of do anything that would jeopardize our efficacy in Kingston. Because we're a public authority, it's also pretty tricky. We would essentially need to start over as an organization. We can't just snap our fingers and expand. We need to redo our whole charter. It would change the board structure. I mean, it would basically be starting over. So it's kind of my position that the timing of this is very premature. That being said, there has been no progress on this for 9 months now. So as far as I know, it's not really on the agenda. Maybe in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana. We appreciate you taking the time out this evening. And, if there are new developments and things you think we should know, please feel free to get in touch.
Yeah. And you guys, likewise, I think you have my email now. Any follow-up questions you might have, super happy to answer. I like talking about this stuff, so.
Thank you again, Daniel.
Thank you guys. Have a great night and a good call.
Right.
Be productive.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So good. So now the next thing, of course, that we wanted to talk about was short-term rental regulations, any potential for that. I sent out a thing that I think as we talk with the public gives a kind of rounded view of all the different things that are involved. As far as us creating something or thinking this through, Don, you were wanting to look at some other cities. Did you get a chance yet to look at those, or?
I did a cursory view, and I think I think we should talk about the most efficient way to attack this, and rather than. And we talked about this a little bit offline, Randy, rather than starting from scratch and wrestling over each and every question, to review the municipalities that you have collected. So, and Michelle also did some research, and go through those and decide whether they apply to our situation here in Kingston.
Okay.
I think that's the best way. I don't know the timing. How do you envision that unfolding?
Well, one thing, of course, would be to share those and share ideas over the next month, think that through. And so our options would be either to meet in a month. One thing would be to look through the laws. We've had some discussion about some of the main issues that we think we would want to focus on. So we didn't necessarily come to conclusions, but there are questions such as, can these only be owner occupied, or can they be commercial entities as well? Should they be in one part of the city, the whole city, different zones, and so forth? So we could look and see if there's a law. Maybe that's what we want to do, is over the next couple of weeks, we can each look and see, is there one municipality that we think best fits our previous discussions? And if we all pick the same one, we could, look at altering that at our next meeting, or we could use the next meeting, if we pick different ones, to, in a sense, hash out which of those elements we think we want to put into one law, because we don't necessarily have to adopt court somebody else. We could take, section from Beacon, a section from Rhinebeck, and, that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. But I think what's important for all three of us is that we're on the road to legislation, I'm very much wanting to put something to the council before the end of the year. However, I do have an open question about the county. What are they doing? And, should we be considering their efforts and also in terms of, registration and any revenue or fees for registering your, or taxes? We should have a clear understanding of what the county has done. I don't know what they've done.
Well, one thing would be to get in touch with Dennis Doyle. I'd be happy also to speak with Dave Donaldson, the representative, at least for our wards, on the county legislature. I don't know that they've done much in this regard, but so I can talk to Don. Would you want to get in touch with Dennis Doyle?
Sure. And we just want to avoid overlap, obviously, and we should be communicating about this. So yes, I'll reach out to Dennis. And
Okay.
They collect a county bed tax, like a hotel tax. So
yeah,
Mhm.
but also, how are they keeping track of it? How are they enforcing it?
well, you should speak to March Gallagher's office too, because she did a lot of work on this.
Good point.
Okay, good. So then we'll be in touch. Let's say then, if I understand the will of the committee here, in about 2 weeks, we could say like 2 weeks, whatever that Thursday is, we'll have looked at the various legislation from different municipalities in the area, and we can just share. We won't discuss, but we can share. Which ones we think we are gravitating toward. And then we would discuss that at the next open meeting in November, with an idea of trying to come out of that meeting with a communication to send to the Common Council for then December consideration.
Yep.
Michelle,
Okay.
what do you think of that timeline?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Get it done.
All right. It's almost finished.
Okay.
Good. So 2 weeks from this Thursday, then the idea is to have picked at least one legislation from another city that looks to be like the best model. And then we can let folks know what that is. And then at the next meeting, we'll discuss the merits of it and so forth, and make that our goal to come out of that meeting with actual legislation. Yes. Okay, good. Last little bit here then, in my discussion, I'm sorry, are we done with that? Everybody good with the plan there? Anything else on short-term rental regulation? Okay. In my brief discussion with Michael Gilliard, he was pointing out that the city, I don't know if you saw this in the paper, but the mayor's office is working with RUPCO to create a fund with $150,000 of COVID money from the federal government, CDBG money, to create a rental assistance program so that it will be in place by January 1st, when, at this point at least, the state moratorium on evictions will be lifted. Of course, it's always possible that the governor will extend that another time, but the idea is to absolutely be ready before the end of December with this fund, so that we would be able to work with families, renters throughout the city whose rent is in arrears due to loss of job or other economic problem related to the COVID crisis.
Can I add something to this, please?
Yes, please do.
Sure. So I'm just concerned that $150,000 is not enough. It's about 45 families. So I've reached out to Assemblyman Cahill's office to find out how many Kingston residents applied to the COVID rental relief program from the New York Homes and Community Renewal grant that was available earlier this year, that the council, signed off on the memorializing resolution, so that we, if that's a way to find out how, what.
That's great.
what we're looking at, numbers wise. And, there's this whole issue of community block money that we need to use it or lose it. So I just, if the number comes in higher than 45 or, I'd like to see us, try to allocate more. And, I did mention that to the mayor. So.
Yeah, good. But there are are different pots of that CDBG money. And so they can be used, some can be used for this and some for that. So that's always the problem.
To explain it. And
Yeah, I wish that it was more flexible, especially in this time of crisis. So one other thing is that the Patterns for Progress report on vacant houses throughout Kingston is going to be published here in the next, or not published, but made public here in another week or so. So that's going to give us something very important to look at in terms of thinking about potential houses. I don't know that it links directly to the land bank. I don't know if the land bank would be the best approach for trying to figure out how to make those public or make them usable again.
Why did Patterns for Progress take that on in the first place? That's,
We paid them to.
We did?
Yeah.
Oh. With that specific data point in mind?
Vacant houses throughout the city.
Oh.
So this will give us a map. It'll also, I believe, give us a sense of the condition that the properties are in. Because this is an issue. We've got these vacant properties and they're not being used for housing. So what needs to happen to move those back to being occupied domiciles?
So does that include a house that might be in REM, or owned by a bank that's just sitting there indefinitely? Would that include those types of zombie houses?
My understanding of the criterion is that the house is not being used for housing. If there's nobody actually living in it or the apartment or what have you.
That's fascinating. I wonder how they're getting their, that's wonderful. I'm happy about that because all over there are so many houses that are just vacant for
there are some. Yeah, so some of it has to do with they can figure out some of it through the tax rolls. Another thing is looking at the water usage. So the assumption is that if there's an apartment or house that has no water usage, the assumption is that it's vacant. And then they can go and look, and do some detective work and see whether it's being used or not.
So then let's say they come up and whatever they come up with, then we would want to create a process for dispensing with them, either a land bank or whatever makes sense.
Part of it is there's a question of, so, if a house is in foreclosure or whatever, that would be one thing. But if some of them are their own, the taxes are being paid, there's just for some reason nobody living in them. And so this might be the question then of could the city go and make an offer and try to purchase the houses? Could the land bank do that? Are there real estate folks who would be interested in working with us to try to get these back to being functioning houses as opposed to empty ones?
And who's quarterbacking this effort in the city, working with Patterns for Progress? Just so who's
Mike Gilliard.
Okay, we're really wonderful.
I mean, the mayor and I met with Patterns for Progress quite a while ago, and it was the mayor then who, in a sense, purchased the service. Who filled out the contract. But once Mike got hired, then he's been the point person on working with Patterns for Progress to get this done. Great,
thank you. Great to hear that.
Yeah. So our empty land bank houses aren't going to show up on this report, are they?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I do know that it's many more units than are subject to land bank acquisition.
Yeah, I bet it's. We should take guesses. I bet it's 100. I bet it's 100 units. Really?
I think it's above 200.
Wow.
But we'll know many more details quite soon. So as soon as that comes out, I'm not sure if the mayor or Mike is going to just automatically send that to all the members of the Common Council or exactly how they're going to distribute it. But if it doesn't come out to all of us at once, I'll make sure that it gets to each of us in particular as soon as possible.
Okay. And there continues to be activity with people trying to get some new developments going around the city. Mr. Blakeman down on the waterfront, is working with the planning department. There is, the E&M portfolio that we've been talking about, the potential of that moving into new hands that might be better to the tenants and improve the buildings and maintain the buildings in a better fashion. So I'm just, it's while gentrification is happening, there's also new a lot of people trying to build here, and so so that's good. All we need is some more land. And so, Randy, if you could put that on your list to create more land in the city, that would be helpful.
Well, Doug Coop would be the one to do that because he teaches physics. So I believe they can just create new land in the laboratory.
I thought you were going to say because he's got the coop and he can create new somethings. Well,
and we do want to keep in mind too that E Squared just opened, so that's 50-something units. The Landmark Place, the old almshouse, is scheduled to open in the summer, I believe, of this coming year, and that's scores of units. And then K&R is talking about a potential unit or a building in Midtown with another several score of units. So these are all geared toward affordable and workforce housing. And of course, now the county is talking about this big project of about 175 housing units up at the old jail site.
Yeah. Also, to the right of UPAC, that building is finally getting the blue tarp that's been hanging from it for.
Oh, I saw that. I saw people in there doing some actual renovation.
That's exactly right. So that's great.
Do you know what sort of market they're going to be aiming at with that one?
I do not. I know that Scott Dutton is the architect on it, and that it is moving ahead. That's all I know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good. Well, anything else anybody wants to add? We're at 7:30 here, which is our allotted hour.
Thank you very much for your time, Andrea. If you're listening, thank you. And we'll see you guys soon.
Excellent. All right. So we've got homework to do. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the due date.
Yes, Professor.
Michelle, anything else?
I'm good.
All right. Okay. Good night, all. Thanks for coming.
Night.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Wake up.
Thanks, Andrea. Bye.
This conference is no longer being